Good morning.
Hello everyone, this is Mr. McMillan, and I'm here with the quiz review problems that were on the last 3 pages, the 15 questions of the quiz review that was posted today on the classroom page. The first 2 pages were a summary sheet of formulas and properties and all that other stuff that we went over in class. I will upload this quiz review document in its entirety so you can still see those 2 pages as well as the written solutions to all of these in that document. So number 1 says Sally is making a garden planter with wood in the shape of a right triangle as shown in the drawing below. What length of wood would complete her garden planter? So one of the biggest mistakes that people make is assuming that we have a special right triangle everywhere we go. And unless we have a 45-degree angle, 30-degree angle, or 60-degree angle, we cannot say whether we have a special right triangle or not. Instead, what we should look for here is how many sides are we given on this right triangle. And if we see here, we see we have one side that says 30 inches and one side that says 40 inches. So we have 2 sides. And since we have 2 sides, we should use the Pythagorean theorem, just straight off. We should just straight up use the Pythagorean theorem. So our Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Well, which ones do we have? Do we have A, B, or C? Well, remember that C is your hypotenuse, which is opposite from your right angle. So the side we're looking for is C in this case. 30 inches is our shorter of the 2 legs, so that's going to be A, and 40 will be B. So A squared plus B squared equals C squared becomes 30 squared plus 40 squared equals C squared. 30 squared is 900 plus 40 squared is 1600 equals C squared. 900 plus 1600 is 2500. Now, here is another point that people make a lot of mistakes on. Make sure when you have a C squared, we're looking for C, not C squared. This is not your answer, okay? You need to do the opposite of a square in a number, and that is by square rooting it. And what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So that means that C is equal to 50 inches. So the length of wood Sally would need would be 50 inches to finish her garden planter there. Number 2, it says which of the following sets of side lengths form a right triangle? So which ones form a right triangle? What you need to have happen here is you need for A squared plus B squared to be equal to C squared, okay? So that's what you're going to do for each one of these. You're going to test each of these options and see which one gives you A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Remember that C is your longest side and A and B are your other 2 sides. So if we do the first one, we do A. Our C value would be 5. Our A and B value would be 3.2 and 4.1. So we take 3.2 squared plus 4.1 squared. And we'll see if that's equal to 5 squared. 3.2 squared gives us 10.24 plus 16.81 is equal to 25. And clearly when you add 10.24 and 16.85, it does not equal 25, so A is not your answer. Next one, B, you have 7 squared, you have 7, 12, and 8. 12 would be your C value, so we would take 7 squared plus 8 squared and see if it's equal to 12 squared. 49 plus 64 would be what we get from 7 squared plus 8 squared. And is that equal to 144? The answer is no, so this is not a right triangle either. C is 1.5, 2, and 2.5, so 2.5 is our C value. 1.5 squared plus 2 squared, we'll see if it equals 2.5 squared. 1.5 squared is 2.25, plus 2 squared is 4, and 2.5 squared gives you 6.25. And when you take 2.25 plus 4, you get 6.25, which does match up. So C is our answer. And just to show you that D is not, when you take 9 squared plus 10 squared, you end up with 181, which does not equal 17 squared, which is 289. Number 3, it says, which of the following sets of side lengths form an acute triangle? And for an acute triangle, what you need is for a squared plus b squared to be greater than c squared. So a squared plus b squared has to be greater than c squared. And if we look here, that means that c squared is small. Okay, c squared is small. So a squared plus b squared here would be 2 squared plus 4 squared. Greater than 5 squared. We'll see if that's true. 2 squared is 4. 4 squared is 16. And we'll see if that's greater than 25. 4 plus 16 is 20, which is not greater than 25. So this is not correct. Let's look at B. And that would be obtuse, by the way, instead of acute. Next up is 7, 8, and 14. So we have 7 squared plus 8 squared, and we'll see if it's greater than 14 squared. 7 squared plus 8 squared is 49 plus 64. And we're going to see if that's greater than 196. And if you take 49 and add 64, you end up getting 113, which is not greater than 196. So B is not correct. Next up is C. C, your a squared plus b squared would be 6 squared plus 8 squared. And see if it's greater than 10 squared. 6 squared plus 8 squared gives you 36 plus 64, which is 100. Is 100 greater than 100? No, it's equal to. So our answer has to be D, but just to make sure, we'll check it out. On D, our a squared plus b squared would be 9 squared plus 11 squared. And we're seeing if that's greater than 12 squared. That gives us 81 plus 121, which if you add that together would indeed be greater than 144. So D is the correct answer. Number 4, it says for the triangle below, determine the values of C and D. So this time we're only given one value in our right triangle, and we want to find the other two. So now is where you need to be looking for these special right triangles. And indeed, we see that we have a 45-degree angle here. So this is a 45, 45, 90. And we're given that the measure of one of the legs is equal to 10. Now, in a 45, 45, 90 triangle, we know that the legs are congruent. So since we know that the legs are congruent, we know that both legs have to be the same value. So that means that C is also equal to 10. Now, there are two ways you can do this. One, you can use the formula, or you can use the Pythagorean theorem now that you know that your other leg is 10, and then see which answer choice would match up. If you do that, please make sure you use Desmos to make sure that all of your calculations end up correct and your decimals do indeed match. I'm going to use the formula method because I know that the hypotenuse of a 45, 45, 90 triangle is equal to the leg times root 2. So the hypotenuse, which is D, is equal to the leg, which is 10, times root 2, which matches up perfectly. If you end up doing it in your Pythagorean theorem, you'll end up with 10 squared plus 10 squared equals D squared, which will give you 200 equal D squared. And you square root both sides, you get D equals 14.14. which is the same as 10 root 2. So either way, you're going to end up with the exact same thing. Number 5, for the triangle below, what is the length of line segment AB? So again, we're looking to see if how many sides we're given. And in this case, we're given 2 already. So all we need to do is use our Pythagorean theorem. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. In this problem, we see that the side opposite from the right angle is 20. So that's our c value. Our short leg is 12, which is a, and AB will be b. So a squared becomes 12 squared, and then plus b squared equals 20 squared. 12 squared is 144, plus b squared equals 400. Subtract 144 from both sides, and you get b squared equals 256. Square root both sides, and you get b equals 16. So b is your other leg, and it equals 16. Number 6, which of the following sets of side lengths form an obtuse triangle? And in this case, you want a squared plus b squared to be less than c squared. In other words, you want c squared to be large. So on A, all your a, b, and c are the same. So you have 12 squared plus 12 squared, and see if it's less than 12 squared. And you end up with 288 is less than 144, which is not true. So A is not obtuse. A would be acute. It would actually be equilateral, which are always acute. B, you have 8, 10, and 13. 13 is your C value. So you have 8 squared plus 10 squared. And we're going to see if that's less than 13 squared. 8 squared plus 10 squared gives you 64 plus 100, which is 164. And is 164 less than 169? Yes, it is. So B is our obtuse triangle. If you tested it out, C would be right and D would be acute. They would not be obtuse. Number 7, would the following side measures of triangle LMK form a right triangle? So you have LM equals 7, KM equals 23, and LK equals 24.5. So again, just like before, we're trying to see if they form a right triangle. So we're looking to see if a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So our c value is 24.5, so that gives us 7 squared plus 23 squared equals 24.5 squared. 7 squared is 49. 23 squared is 529. And 24.5 squared is 600.25. And as you can see, if we add 49 and 529, there's no way it's going to give us 600.25. So this would be no. Number 8. Number 8 is one of the trickier ones. And it wants to know, what is the length of MN? So what you need to make sure you're aware of is that you have a triangle here that is basically cut in half. And it's cut in half here. And we know it's cut in half because both of these side lengths are the same. So both of these side lengths are the same. And it has the same middle segment here. So these two right triangles are identical. Since we already have two sides to the right triangle, we can go ahead and use the Pythagorean theorem. But we need to figure out what the whole side MN is, not just part of it. Well, if we find out what this part is, since we know that these two right triangles are identical, we would also know what this part is. So let's look for that one. 17 is our hypotenuse, which is C. 15 is B, and our missing side is a. So we do a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and you get a squared plus 15 squared equals 17 squared. A squared, 15 squared is 225. 17 squared is 289. Subtract 225 from both sides, and you get a squared equals 64. Then to get rid of your square, you have to square root both sides, and you get a equals 8. Now remember, if this is on a multiple choice test, they're going to probably have 8 there as one of the answers. But 8 isn't our answer because we want the entire thing, not just 1/2 of it. So we know that these two halves are equal. So we know that mn has to equal 8 plus 8, which is equal to 16. Number 9, what is the length of the diagonal of a rectangle that is 7 feet wide and 24 feet long? So we're dealing with a rectangle here. So we know there are right angles, and that diagonal will split it into 2 congruent right triangles. So it wants to know what is the length of the diagonal. Well, the diagonal is the hypotenuse, which is C. And it says this is 7 feet wide and 24 feet long. Well, we have 2 sides already. We have our 2 legs here, and we want to know the hypotenuse. So 7 is our A value, B is 24, and we have A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So we have 7 squared plus 24 squared equals C squared. 7 squared is 49. 24 squared is 576, and that's equal to C squared. 49 plus 576 is 625, equal to C squared. And now we need to solve for C. To get rid of our squared, we need to square root both sides. The square root of 625 ends up being 25. So the length of the diagonal is 25 feet. Number 10, it says an equilateral triangle is folded in half. What is X, the height of the equilateral triangle? Now it says this equilateral triangle is folded in half, and one of the sides is 38. So since it's folded in half this way, we know that each one of these smaller bits is equal to half the length of the 38, so it's equal to 19. Now if you'll notice, there is a 60-degree angle here. So we know that this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle, and we want to find what the long side is. And the long side in a 30, 60, 90 triangle is equal to the short side times the square root of 3. So that means that X is equal to the short side of 19 times root 3. The other way you could do that, you know that each side is 38. Then you could use your 19 and 38 to figure out X. And then if this were multiple choice, you just pick the correct decimal. Number 11, it says to mark the end of a race, a finish line banner is stretched across the road as shown in the drawing. What is the value of X rounded to the nearest tenth? So we see that we have a right triangle here, and we want to find what X is. So our 2 legs are 8 and 11. 8 is A, B is 11, and C is X. So A squared plus B squared equals C squared. That becomes 8 squared plus 11 squared equals X squared. 8 squared is 64. 11 squared is 121, equal to X squared. 64 plus 121 is 185. Then we square root both sides, and we find that x is approximately equal to 13.6. And notice it says rounded to the nearest tenth, which is why there's only the 1 decimal place. So x has to equal 13.6 13.6 feet. Number 12, classify the following sets of side lengths as acute, right, or obtuse. So looking at A, we have 18, 25, and 22 and 25. So we have 18 squared plus 22 squared. 18 squared plus 22 squared, if you type that into Desmos, ends up being 808. And then you have 25 squared, which is 625. C squared is small in this case, so this is acute. 11, 60, and 61. You have 11 squared plus 60 squared, which ends up giving you 3,721. Then you have 61 squared, which also gives you 3,721. So C squared is equal. So this is a right triangle. C, you have 5, 9, and 13. So you have 5 squared plus 9 squared, which is 25 plus 81, which is 106. Then you have 13 squared, which is 169. C squared is larger, so that means it is obtuse. And then D, 31, 42, and 39. You have 31 squared plus 39 squared, which is 2482. Then you have 42 squared, which is equal to 1764. C squared is smaller, so that means this is acute. All right, we're on the finishing stretch. Number 13, given the two lengths of the legs of a right triangle are 11.2 inches and 17.8 inches, determine the length of the hypotenuse to the nearest tenth of an inch. So I'm going to draw a picture here of the triangle. And it says, given two lengths of the legs of a right triangle are 11.2 inches and 17.8 inches, determine the length of the hypotenuse. So we have two sides already, so we can just go straight into a squared plus b squared equals c squared. 11.2 is our a value, 17.8 is our b value, and c is x, because we're looking for the hypotenuse. So we have 11.2 squared plus 17.8 squared is equal to x squared. 11.2 squared is 125.44 plus 316.84, which is equal to x squared. 125.44 plus 316.84 is 442.28, which is equal to x squared. Square root both sides to get rid of the squared, and you find that x is going to be approximately 21.0 inches. Number 14, it says for the triangle below, what is the length of PR and SR? So what we need to do here is see if we have a special right triangle. We do, and it's a 30, 60, 90 triangle. We can tell that because of the 30-degree angle there. So the 30-degree angle is opposite the 12, so that means that we already have the short side. So PR is our hypotenuse, and RS is our long leg. So our formulas for 30, 60, 90, the hypotenuse is equal to 2 times the short leg So that means that the hypotenuse C is equal to 2 times 12, which is equal to 24. So that means that PR is 24. Next up, our long leg is equal to the short leg times root 3. So that means that B is equal to 12 times root 3, which is just 12 root 3. And number 15, last one. Given the length of one of the legs of a right triangle is 33 feet and the length of the hypotenuse is 65 feet, determine the length of the other leg. Round your answer to the nearest tenth. So again, we're going to draw our diagram here. So it says one leg is 33 feet. The length of the hypotenuse is 65 feet. And we don't know what our missing leg is. So we have two sides. We can use the Pythagorean theorem. Our C value is 65 and our A value is 33. So we have A squared plus B squared equals C squared. A squared is 33 squared, and then plus B squared equals 65 squared. 33 squared is 1089, plus B squared equals 4,225. We need the B squared by itself, so we're going to subtract 1089 from both sides, and we get that B squared is equal to 3,136. Square root both sides to get rid of the squared, and you get B equals 56. And that is our last problem there. I hope this has helped you prepare for the quiz. If you have any more questions, please shoot me an email and tell me a time that would be good to meet over Zoom or something else, and I will be more than happy to help you, and so would Mr. Thompson. Thanks, guys, and I will see you in the next video.